Okay, this is the recorded lesson for Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. This is what you are going to be watching and listening to as you continue to fill out your graphic organizer for the scientific method. So we're going to practice some independent learning by still signing into Zoom, which you all did, and working a little bit independently by still being on Zoom, by having your cameras off and chatting with Ms. Gagnon through the Zoom chat if you have questions, rather than shouting out. Because when we shout out and watch a video at the same time, it gets all confusing and it messes everyone up. So we're going to be respectful of everyone's learning time and make sure that we are just putting our questions and concerns in the chat, in the Zoom chat, to Ms. Gagnon today. So today we are going to be reviewing the recorded lesson here, and we are completing all of our work that is due on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, and on October 5th, right? So our homework is to finish up all of that classwork due on Wednesday. Most of you still have 3 assignments left to complete. That is the discussion, hypothesis versus prediction discussion, the creating hypothesis worksheet, and observations around the house. So make sure that's all getting done. Our learning objective today is by the end of class, we will know the different parts of an experiment and how to record our observations and gather data. So I'm going to ask you to get out your agenda books, pause the video, and write down your homework in your agenda book. Right? So let me I know some of you get hung up on the topic, so I'm just going to write that. The topic is the scientific method. We're still on that unit, and we are finishing all of our classwork. Okay. So the 4th step of the scientific method is to take all of the other steps, all of that together. So the problem and research question, all of our background information and hypothesis. Now this is the fun part. We actually get to experiment. We actually get to use all of our background information and our thinking, our good thoughts, to perform an experiment. An experiment is broken into 2 parts. We've got materials and we have the procedure. Okay. So it's important that as we go along, that we remember that the experiment isn't just the act of doing the experiment, right? There's a couple of different aspects of an experiment. They are the materials, so what you need, and the procedure, what you did or what you're doing, or what you will do, depending on which stage you're in. So the materials is just a list of equipment that you'll need for the experiment. You want to try to remember even the most simple things, like if you need a pen or a pencil or a piece of paper. Or let's say you were working on, melting ice cubes. Make sure in your materials you put frozen water or ice, something along those lines. So the materials is just one part of the experiment. It is just a list of the equipment and tools, materials, goods that you will need for the experiment. The procedure is the second part. So the procedure is a list of instructions that you need to follow for the experiment. Okay? So procedure is a list of instructions that you need to follow for the experiment. And this is where the independent and dependent variables come into play. Okay? So not only did we talk about independent and dependent variables when creating our hypothesis, but also in our experiment. So when we're writing down our procedure, for 6th grade, most of the times the procedure is going to be given to you. I'm going to give you a list of materials that you need, and I'm going to go through the steps of which you should be taking to complete the experiment. There will be times when I ask you to write out your materials and your procedure, what you did. So sometimes your materials will be different than others. So if I had asked you to get a cup for an experiment, well, some of us have glass cups and some of us have the plastic like Solo cups or the clear plastic cups that, kind of squish easily. And then others of us have that heavy duty plastic cup. So those 3 different examples, they're all cups, but they're all made of different things and they're all made a little bit differently. So being specific on which type of cup you used could be very important in this experiment. Okay. Let's say we were doing an experiment with that we used paper, and we made a paper airplane. Well, specifying what type of paper you used might affect the outcome of the experiment. So if you used very thin notebook paper versus thick cardstock or almost cardboard-like paper, your airplane is going to be different and it's going to fly through the air differently. So that's why it's important that we write down our materials. So that way, if someone else wants to try to do the same thing as us, they can. They can. Because they know exactly what we used. Okay. So I also talked about the procedure. The procedure is, again, that list of instructions that you need to follow for the experiment. And I had said that for 6th grade, for the most part, I will be giving you a procedure. Well, let's say you're going through the procedure and you miss a step. Well, that's why I'm going to still have you write out the procedure, because if your experiment went wrong, especially now, I'm not able to be there and help you get right on the right track. So it's important that you specify what you did and sometimes what you didn't do. So if you missed a step, make sure you note that. And I also said that this is where the independent and dependent variables come into play. Now, why do I say that? Well, remember that the independent variable is the thing we're changing and the thing that we're testing, right? So what's an experiment? The chance when we get to go test things and then look at the outcome. So that is why we can also talk about the independent and dependent variables here, because the experiment is where we're actually doing the changing, the manipulating, and the testing, and where we get to see the actual outcomes. So that is why we talk about the independent and dependent variables here. Okay. All right. So the last part of the scientific method we are going to talk about today. It's not the end of the method. This is just the last thing we're going to be talking about today because it relates to the experiment part. Observations and gathering data. Or data. So this is the collection of information and data from the experiment, all right? Has to do with observations, which is why we talked about those 2 observations that start with a Q. Qualitative with an L and quantitative with a T, right? This is where that comes into play, right here. So we're collecting information and data and observations from the experiment, right? It can be charts, graphs, written work. It could be pictures. It could be tally marks. It could be numbers. Depending on which type of observation you're making, whether it's a measurement, which would be quantitative, or more of a visual comparison, color type, what does it feel like? Qualitative observation will depend on what your reporting will look like. So the observations, this is what happened. This is what you saw. So this is the outcome. This is what happened here. And just like the owl is saying here, we want to remember our qualitative and our quantitative observations. So typically qualitative observations, that first one with the L, whoops, hold on, one moment, there we go. So one with the L, those are going to be more pictures and written descriptions. Quantitative observations, they might be more of the graphs, more of the pie charts, more of the XY axis charts. So we've got different ways to display our data. It can be pictures, charts, written word, graphs. They can be bar charts. There's possibilities are endless here for how you can report your observations. Just make sure that as you are doing your experiment that you take pictures and you write things down, because depending on the nature of the experiment, you might not be able to go back and recreate and get those pictures and make those observations. So remember, as you are going through your experiment, that you are also making observations. Maybe you're writing down things that just seem off or weird. Maybe more things that you wonder, which could then prompt another experiment. So today we talked about 3 different parts of the scientific method. Oh, sorry, nope, just... Hold on. Nope, we just talked about 2 parts of the scientific method today. The experiment and gathering data and observations. All right, so for the rest of class, you are to work on all of the work that is due this week, which is the discussion, hypothesis versus prediction discussion. It is the creating hypothesis worksheet, and it is the identifying variables worksheet that was homework for last night, and one more, the observations around the house. So you've got 3 items due tomorrow, and you have 1 item due next week. So just keep in mind that you don't want to get behind, so be diligent and work on those as best you can. If you are done with all of these items, you're still in Zoom, so send me a chat and I can send you a link to another little video that the rest of us may or may not have time to get to.